All right, thank you. All right, welcome y'all. We really appreciate y'all for joining us on this Thursday evening. I know at least several of us on this call have had long days, but nonetheless, we're excited to be in this space with y'all so we could talk a little bit about surveillance. And so, as y'all see, based on the title, we're going to be talking about ALPRs, which we're abbreviating as automatic license plate readers. I don't know about y'all, but over the last few weeks, I have seen a lot of my social media feeds and stories have been filled with conversations regarding surveillance, particularly surrounding flock. And so questions that have come up for me is, are we being tracked right now? Who is watching us and what can we do? And so we hope throughout this presentation, some of those questions will be answered for y'all, and we can also dive into those together. And so we'll jump into go over the agenda, please. All right, today the conversation, we scheduled about 90 minutes, but we don't think the conversation will last that long. But during this conversation, we'll have some brief check-ins. We'll go over what are ALPRs, how are ALPRs used, who profits from them, current organizing, so when and tactics that we have seen across the nation, but also here in Chicago and the surrounding areas. What's missing, roadblocks, the Chicago context, and then building power. So before we jump into the fun stuff, we'll have a quick check-in. And so if folks can share in the chat, and then we'll invite about 3 or 4 people to come off of mute to share your name, pronouns, organization, region, relevant, organizing, and anything else you want to share. In addition to that, Nat, could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. We also have 3 questions if you feel like answering them. So what brought you here today? What do you already know about ALPRs and how do ALPRs connect to your work? And so I'll give folks some time to put it in the chat. But also if you would like to come off of mute, please feel free to put your hand up and then we can unmute you. But I can kick us off. So I'm sorry, now I already forgot the other check-in questions. Could you go back to the initial thing, please? I got you. Thank you. So my name is Julia, y'all. It's nice to meet y'all. I use she, her pronouns. I am in Cook County, Bronzeville area. I'm organized with BYP 100. So I've been doing that for about 5 years at this point. And what brought me into this space, I am one curious, but also passionate about exploring surveillance and also combating it, particularly within Black communities. So if anyone would like to respond verbally, you're more than welcome to do so. Just let us know either by saying so in the chat or raising your hand.
I can go out loud. Hi, Nat, Sheila. I'm also with Black Youth Project 100. I'm with Parsons Labs. Stay on the west side of Chicago. I've done organizing in various spaces. What brought me here today? Really want to help build out the space in Chicago to counter some of the surveillance we're seeing. What do I already know about APR, ALPRs? Generally, I know how they work and that they are used by the pigs, which sucks. And then how do they connect to my work? I'm all about anti-surveillance. I'm all about liberation, and we know that anything that can be utilized by the cops for quote unquote crime solving can just as easily be turned against us for anything else, and that crime solving is usually just a red herring for anti-Black stuff. I think we have probably time for like another 1 or 2 people if they want to share aloud.
Yeah, and feel free just to come off of mute.
I can go. Hi everyone. My name is Matt Chapman. He, him. I'm here in Chicago. I live in Albany Park. I work at Lucy Parsons Labs as a researcher, and I've been doing anti-surveillance, transparency, FOIA work for about 8, 10 years, something like that. And a lot of the organizing I do is around trying to build people up in submitting FOIA requests that help kind of empower their work and their communities.
Thank you. All right. Unless anyone else would like to come off of mute, we can pass it to Freddie to kind of kick us off into a deeper conversation.
Hi everyone, Freddie McDinnis, Lucy Parsons Labs. So I just have a few things I want to mention about ALPRs. Um, the first thing is that this is not new technology. It was developed in the 1970s primarily by the British to track the Irish as they were moved around during the period known as the Troubles. But what we've seen sort of happen in the last couple of decades is the advancement of technology has made it faster and cheaper for this kind of thing to proliferate. So you see this very kind of low cost technology being used for everything like bus lane enforcement, parking enforcement. Um, we've seen some school districts in Cook County use it to validate, quote unquote, validate whether or not someone lives in a particular district, so that they can see if a person is enrolling their child in the school that is or does or doesn't pertain to them according to whatever the license plate reader technology tells them. They automatically track the license plates, GPS information, timestamps, and things like. We've also seen things like attempts to track like known affiliates of a person. So if you're traveling with a group of people often, who might those people be? Do you have a roof rack um on your car? Do you have a busted up bumper? Those sorts of things. They're everywhere. We've seen them on top of on poles, mounted poles. We see them hidden in barrels of like construction barrels on the side of the road. Usually they're facing in multiple directions. So if the traffic is going this way, the license plate reader would be like facing the same direction so that like it can see the license for a longer period of time. And then of course it would be in the opposite direction. There'll be another one facing the other direction. And then like I kind of mentioned very briefly and very quickly is that this technology is not new. So there are very popular like programming libraries where if you wanted to, you could write your own like license plate reader program that would work in an afternoon if you have even sort of basic understanding of programming. And so what happens is that the software vendors and the people who are marketing this technology have to find a way to differentiate their product from other ALPR vendors. And so the way that they do that is that they create all sorts of software on top of it. So the ability to share custom hot lists or the ability to, for example, find a car and backtrack its locations throughout a city over time, or the ability to say like I'm looking for I don't know the exact license plate, but I know I'm looking for a white Honda Prius with a roof rack, with a busted up front bumper, or things like that. And so I can we go to the forward slide? I don't know if I'm jumping ahead or not. Yeah. Okay, and then I'll just finish the thought before I move on. And so what you hear a lot of concerns about is the data sharing. Thank you for going back. You'll hear a lot of concerns about data sharing and data agreements and things like that. The primary mechanism for an ALPR network relates to what is called network effects. If you've ever studied economics, you know that there are things that are called like network effects, and it's this theory that what makes a network valuable is the amount of people on it. Like social media websites are a good example, or telephone networks are another great example, right? Like if I have a phone at my house, it doesn't really do me any good unless all of my neighbors have phones at their houses and I can reach them, right? And so the more of my networks that have more people in my networks that have a cell phone, the more valuable the network is. This is the same with like Facebook, right? Everyone's on Facebook because all of their friends are on Facebook. And so what happens with ALPRs and surveillance technologies generally is these vendors are on a race to get them installed as quickly as possible in as many places as possible to collect as much data as possible, which means that and we'll talk about like the guardrails that people have attempted to put on ALPRs. Those have been largely ineffective. In fact, absolutely ineffective. And we can go to the next slide now. Because the ways that these companies are going to make money is by basically creating networks of networks. And ultimately, these tools do not improve safety. You'll hear this kind of refrain often from police departments. We've done a lot of research into like the kinds of crimes that are, for example, like I don't like to get into this back and forth about what are you doing about solving crimes, but to be illustrative, I think here's a good example. In Berwyn, there's this fight around the flock contract, and the chief of police was like, we use this tool to find missing children and to solve murders. And the question was like, okay, do you have any evidence of that happening? And he's like, no, but we could. And of course, people started booing and like throwing the proverbial popcorn at him, right? Like, not really, but you know what I mean. And so these things that are being primarily targeted as improving safety are, the companies like Flock are not interested in improving safety. Safety to them is like the thing that they're using to expand their business, but the real business that they're in is like collecting data, retraining data, much in the same way that like Facebook is not in the interest of connecting you with your friends from high school. It's interested in selling ads, and so there's all this like secondary layer of like collecting information about you that happens on Facebook. That's about targeting ads and expanding the reach of Facebook. That has nothing to do with can you post on your friends' walls. And then ultimately, what's happening is accelerating in a massive reshaping of our lives by what I would argue are fundamentally anti-democratic and anti-social companies. Whenever a contract gets canceled for these companies, they don't like take the technology down because they don't believe in things like democratic control of communities, like all corporations. They're totalitarian institutions. I think we can go forward. I think we've talked a little bit about this, but I just want to reiterate that there are ALPR vendors, like the people who are selling and buying the technology, and then there's the ALPR operators, which are two different subsets. So like there are the people who are writing the software and the hardware and putting up the cameras themselves, and then they're doing the capturing of the records. And then they sell it to an operator. So an operator would be someone like a police department or like a Lowe's Hardware, or Home Depot is a very popular or big user of things like Flock. And so there's these two pressure points of bad behavior. One is like the operators who are putting the stuff up and paying the contracts, and then there are the people who are writing the software who want to create all of these feature sets which are used by the operators. And so like when you hear about cops stalking their ex-girlfriends with Flock, not only are they looking through like data collected by on city streets and out in the public, but also at like malls and HOA associations and the Lowe's and the Home Depot and so on. And then of course, because they want to make their technology sellable, they have to create all of the software where they can do all of these things, including sharing data with other people. I think that's it for my portion. Can we go one more
Real
slide?
quick, if I can just
Yeah.
add, just really want to emphasize how much the data isn't just being sold to other private companies, but to other federal agencies. And we'll talk about this a little more later, but it's very important to recognize, like, even if your local police department is like, hey, we're just collecting it for our use, the reality is the only way it gets to federal agencies, the only way it gets to all of these things is by us giving it away to these more local departments who then happily work on behalf of ICE, the DEA, FBI to specifically target Black and brown people.
Yeah, and one thing that I didn't mention because I don't know if the slide's there, but people can pull data. So, for example, the Berwyn police could um, decide to share all of their data with every law enforcement agency in Cook County. That's one thing. They can do sharing between departments. They can do sharing between like Lowe's from Lowe's to the Berwyn police, but not from Berwyn police to Lowe's. And so these multifaceted levels of sharing agreements change quite literally on the daily. There's a lot of polling. You can, and we've also seen things like you could buy access to a network share without operating the hardware itself. So um, you can see how this like pressure to buy and sell and expand the camera use, especially at a time where like cameras are getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, so the margins on selling the hardware are much smaller. Like the way to make that up is to sell more and more software services to more and more people. You can see that like the idea of constraining data sharing to like ICE or immigration or across state lines is impossible to enforce, especially when um, the name of the game is to share as widely as possible. That's the whole thing that's the whole point of making it that's what makes the network valuable.
Freddie,
Is
would
this
you be
still me
able to
or
talk
someone
about
else?
this a bit?
Um, yeah, I can talk about this. So there are a lot of vendors in space. Um, and one thing that I've tried to get across to people, activists and city council members and everyone that I've talked to is again, the way that they differentiate themselves from each other is by adding features. So for example, Flock Safety says that they're going to put ALPRs on drones that can pick up your license plate from 2,000 feet away. Um, and you know, like because the like idea of like who because they like Axon, their entire marketing thing is we're not Flock. Like that's their entire marketing stance. So there's this entire like web of people that are trying to get into this space because they see it as like a growth opportunity, but they all have to differentiate themselves from each other. So like Axon with a taser mounted on a drone with an ALPR and a body cam is like their vision of how to differentiate themselves from Flock, which is like put an ALPR on a drone that follows you around. And so like, you know, you can see where the future is headed, right? But these like decisions are all being driven by largely like corporate profit decisions. And not because of like anything that we decided as a community.
Is this me? I think this might be me. All right. So here we're showing these are the communities that have totally deflocked, and there are even more. Um, we've had over 100 cancellations, largely due to uh, pressure from grassroots activists like you. Um, what is on the next slide? Right. Awesome. Um, yeah, so um one of the really cool, fun things about joining this movement is that if you have a particular way that you like to nerd out, or if you have a particular skill set, there is a place for you to plug this in. We are composed of organizers, researchers, journalists, and even people that have skills like graphic design or that sort of thing. Like we've got people making zines, and so whatever your skill set, there's definitely a place for that here. um let's see. One of the things that I discovered when I got involved with DFLAC is how city council works. That's not something that I had ever really bothered to figure out before now. And I started because I didn't really have like any idea of where to start. I just started by looking at the list of people that were on city council, and then uh, I pushed aside the people that I knew would already agree with me, and then I looked at the people that were left, and I I picked out probably like a couple people that were kind of more right leaning than I am, and then I thought about what could I talk to that person about that they would resonate with. And it was actually really easy. One of the people that were like the original people to vote flock in my city, which is Galesburg, she's like a staunch libertarian. And so I called her up and I was just like, hey, what do you think about this system? Like that you voted for, right? And and she was like, well, I am pro police. I come from a police family, but she really resonated with the privacy concerns, and that has been like more and more in the news media. So I kind of agitated that wedge or that concern that was already in her mind, and I kind of let her lead herself kind of down this path of thinking about it and researching it, and then I shared with her the concerns. But anyway, without going into like super detail about this, like she did end up being kind of like this cornerstone of changing the city council's mind, because people um weren't expecting that from her, for one thing. And for another thing, she was one of the original people that voted it in. So, different tactics for different situations, but it really pays just to like get to know what the landscape is in your local area. And it can be really, really fun too to develop one-on-one relationships with your city council. So anyway, I went down the list. I actually like talked to all of the city council people individually before I went to talk at city council, and and we've got a verbal agreement after just a couple of months of that, not an official stance, but we have a verbal agreement that they're going to let the contract expire and not replace it with anything else. So it's also uh, I kind of went into it with this attitude that I wasn't sure how much of a difference that I could make, but it does turn out that having these like personal conversations with your local electeds is very effective. What were you saying? Somebody trying to comment? All right. Um, all right. Another tactic that we employ is like building relationships with local media. And the local media has been declining for like, probably the last 20 years. It's really like kind of struggling financially as an industry. But if you can find the people in your area that are writing about, that are covering the news in a good way, and develop relationships with them, and then take the time to talk to them about this issue, because it is a little bit of like it takes some time to process and put all the pieces together of how these layers of things work. Like It's the data privacy, it's the oligarchs, it's like the insecure hardware, it's like all the things, it's the police abusing it. But talking to talking to local journalists is good. I think it's good for like the local ecosystem too. Um, one thing that really attracted me to this movement is that when I kind of saw the scope of like all these things that we can be doing, all these ways that we can be engaging and all the relationships that we can be forming as we do it, I just thought, oh my God, this would be so, so good for strengthening the power of local governance, right? Like, I feel like just yeah, creating like reasons to engage with our government and with each other, even just stuff like for example, right now, Matt Chapman has been kind of helping me navigate what to do when the FOIA officer doesn't fulfill my FOIA in the way that the law describes they should. Having that conversation, while it requires patience and it's a little bit of a pain, um, it is also it's a learning process for me and for them, and ultimately, whatever comes of it, hopefully, it does. Um, Require the public body to prioritize doing better in the future moving forward. And so that is ultimately a win for local governments. Um, and let's see, like, cool, awesome. Okay, so accountability. Um, yeah, so Flock, it's like really problematic for a number of reasons. One of them is that, like, I would say they are very focused on protecting property, not people. I would say like the whole kind of techno fascist movement is going on right now is that prioritizing stuff over people. Um and I have a huge issue with companies that are trying to influence our politics and trying to influence our city councils, or in some cases, even like populating our city councils or hiring people off of our city councils or using money to influence elections or the way that our local government works. Like all of that is something that we should all be worried about. Um, let's see, overwhelming me here. I feel like it's so weird that one thing that really makes me mad about all of this is just like how much work it's taking for us to get rid of them and how little work it seemingly was for them to put them up, right? Like it seems to me like just the imbalance of how easy it was or how quickly it went up versus like how hard it is to take down speaks to the fact that money kind of like speaks louder than people sometimes. So that capital and that capitalization, it creates like this imbalance of power between corporations and people that we should all be worried about for sure. Um, yeah, what is missing? So what we're trying to add here, well, I would say one of the first things that we're trying to add here is like just public awareness. It's still like it's something that takes time. It takes like kind of sustained effort over time to help people to understand why they should care about this or even why they should worry about this when they have so many other things to worry about. Um, Captured means that consistently reports on surveillance harm. Yeah. I definitely have seen media like it seems to me like flock stuff has become a little bit of a hot topic this summer. And so I feel like that's due to our efforts of working just putting the word out on social media or developing those relationships with journalists. But we definitely need to help people to understand that this is not just about flock. It's not about just about the specific system. It's about all systems that are doing surveillance because they all connect with each other for one thing, And it's the concept of creating this panopticon. It's the concept of just like putting cameras everywhere and normalizing it. That's the problem. It's not specifically Flock, although Flock is particularly bad. Um, yeah, was there anything else? Or does anyone else have anything to add about that? I would say.
I have one
Yeah,
thing
I
I can
think
add.
just,
Oh,
oh,
sorry.
Matt.
One thing I'll add is about the uncaptured media. I definitely think that like a lot of journalist organizations tend to be a little afraid, a little nervous to talk about these things. I think they are afraid of getting sued.
Oh, that's a really good point. And thank you for saying that because I have somebody that I've been cultivating, I've been trying to get her to write about this. And I cannot speak for her as to why it's taken her so long or what her problem is, but if there's a problem at all. And I appreciate her, but it does seem to me like I don't know if she's worried about getting sued, but I will say that it's a very small town, it's a very small area. Everyone knows everyone. In some cases, everyone went to high school together. And we don't want to offend each other. We don't want to make it so that that person won't talk to us in the future. We don't want to create bad blood. So it's like, I feel like it's kind of, at least in central Illinois where I am, we're just kind of like peaceful folks that don't want to offend anyone. And we're afraid of confrontation. I'm not afraid of confrontation, but they're afraid of confrontation. So it is a little bit hard. And to the extent that I feel like I was unfairly covered in the newspaper because I gave my public comment and it was very valid. And then the police chief got to have the last word. And then that was kind of like what set the tone for the entire article. And then he wanted to have the audacity to like um act like I was attacking him when I asked him, through FOIA to justify the things that he said in the newspaper. So anyway, that is a good point. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, and I just want to add a couple things before passing it off to Ale. Thank you, Arletti. That was a beautiful, like wonderful job. Thank you. To the what's missing piece and connecting it back to the accountability piece, something that's been brought up in the chat is sort of this idea of legitimacy in sort of viewpoint. And one of the reasons, one of the main strategies from a lot of the researchers involved and organizers is reaching out to independent media is because this helps build more legitimacy on our side off bat. We usually don't have these strong relationships with electeds as folks who advocate for things that are almost seen as or just generally unpopular. So we are trying to figure out how we can build stronger relationships with media and pushing our analysis beyond flock and into a larger idea of how we build community safety. Because if we're able to connect anti-surveillance to community safety, it becomes a lot easier than pigeonholing ourselves to one company or one technology. And then, yeah, Ale, if you're able to tap
Yeah.
in.
Hello, can you hear me? Cool. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for letting you. Thanks, Nat. I'm here to jump in. There are a serious number of roadblocks, of course, in trying to reduce this rapid expansion of ALPRs, of surveillance apparatuses at large. I think one that's worth noting is because of the way these networks function, and Freddie did a really great job explaining how they do that earlier on. Uh, Although we might think of like, there's a flock network here in my city or my county, and there's one somewhere else. The reality of it is that these networks are all integrated across each other. So the way that they share data makes it so that it's not just like an individual like Flock contract is setting up a network in your area, but it's really like Flock is a single thing. It's expanding rapidly and it grows every time a new contract gets placed. And even just beyond that sort of a single corporate product, data doesn't really stay in one place at one time. So this by buying and selling and trading of data means that this network of surveillance, this large nexus of surveillance across various police departments, federal agencies, and corporate bodies is in some way also very integrated, and information just travels in a way that's extremely hard to actually monitor. Even if we somehow had the opportunity to monitor every one of these devices that Flock puts down, like we wouldn't be able to really monitor where the data is going, in between the lines, for example. And the other sorts of tools that, maybe someone who is very, we'll say, optimistic about liberal democracy might want to rely on. Those tools aren't really very effective either. Policing in and of itself, I'm sure I don't have to speak much to it in this chat, but it's not a very democratic procedure. There's not really much happening within the world of policing or even adjacent to it that is ensuring there's any kind of direct public conversation or also decision making happening. And to Arletty's points earlier, there is a very spooky and gross situation where we're seeing corporate bodies become more and more directly involved with state making and statecraft. So the Fourth Amendment and immigration law itself, the interpretation of the Fourth Amendment and the interpretation of various pieces of immigration law is it's changing in real time. We're seeing it become things that end up serving state and corporate interests, or at the very least in a way that doesn't get in the way of state and corporate interests. And one example that I think is quite common is Illinois has what's called the Trust Act. The intention behind the Trust Act is largely around preventing information to be shared between immigration agencies and police departments in the state. And of course, any legal or policy scholars in the chat, feel free to correct me. And while that's here, while we have things like, this reminder that we have Chicago as a sanctuary city, and there are supposedly these immigration policies that are meant to keep our immigrant friends, families, and neighbors uh, given a higher standard of safety. The reality of it is, like you can just open the news at any point in time and see that it's not working. We're seeing the that Border Patrol are already monitoring drivers, and license plate readers tend to be a source of that kind of data that's involved with that. We see that often police departments in Chicago are sharing information with ICE or Homeland Security or other federal agencies. And while they might not have it within their policies to do things like that, we know that it happens informally fairly frequently, and that's very distressing. The Trust Act, I took a snippet of it over here on the lower right. And it says, pretty directly that these are things that aren't supposed to happen. Like immigration agents are not supposed to be using the facilities or equipment, including databases that are not available to the public. Something like a database Flock might be serving its customers in the Chicago Police Department. And they're not supposed to enter into any agreements regarding the direct access of that information. But lo and behold, it keeps happening over and over again. So that goes to the last point that even though this sort of policy might be in place, it's showing to be, we say it's unenforceable in this slide. I think it might as well be more useful to just say it's ineffective to think that this kind of policy route is strong enough or resilient enough to deal with the overreach and creep of these surveillance apparatuses and how this big tech world is rapidly eroding our own rights to just like privacy and safety and so forth. Next slide, please. Yeah, so there are, as I mentioned before, there's loads of stories. I won't get into them for too long, but I threw up like three or four from just the last 2 days. One thing I'll say is we tend to know that Department of Homeland Security and the FBI, these federal agencies, are of course monitoring our FOIA requests. Matt, I don't know if you have much to say about that, but I'll give you a second to jump in if you want. But I think, yeah, no worries. But I think, this is to Arletty's point, like this is one of the topics, right? For this is one of the crises that I think has captivated even the most captured media. You can't really read the newspaper and not see a story about like surveillance and license plate readers and like, facial recognition and so forth. I think we live in an age where the question of surveillance is no longer niche. It's very much something that's become public. And a lot of that has been thanks to all of this grassroots organizing and like effective work at battling against the extension of these objects, but also just like us being locked into battle with what's essentially a bunch of super rich losers, in tech that are just putting all of these dumb, like bullshit products out all over the place. We've long, many organizers have long predicted that there would be issues like this, and they've never been inevitable, but we are seeing that what many of us have feared have started taking place. You've seen ICE tap into nationwide AI-enabled camera networks, data shows. Police are being told to be as big as possible about why they use Flock. These are, some headlines we see from 404 Media. Some more recent ones. I saw a shiny thing. Cop explains why he used license plate reader to stalk women. We're constantly seeing that the individuals, usually cops that have access to these technologies are using them for their own like personal devious desires. Um, to the point about policing itself being undemocratic, the cop who took on Flock, this is a story that Wired put out, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, about a cop in San Diego who tried countering their usage of Flock and then just got like put on various affairs investigations as a result. So, there are these internal mechanisms that policing has itself. So if there is any kind of pushback, even internal to these orgs, it'll just get squashed immediately. So there's like you can't depend on those institutions to monitor their own usage of these tools. That's like ridiculous. Darth Vader wants Flock in San Diego. I saw that movie. I don't think he was the good guy, as far as I could tell. And then the last one here too is this one's interesting. It's from yesterday in Wired. Um, Flock has been trying to. Freddie mentioned, companies like Flock. I say Flock a lot because Flock's like the biggest name. Let's just like imagine any sort of company that's trying to develop and sell this technology. But in this case, Flock has been trying to carve its like position in the market by utilizing more AI tech in its software. And without going to like huge details on what that could possibly mean, you can just assume AI tech, you use AI largely for when you have a lot of data and you want to like try to make categories out of it. And what they're trying to do with their tool that they've been testing is they're looking at how the cars drive on the road based on the data across multiple data points. So like they can try to determine who's driving the car without even using the plate, right? Like they look at the behavior of the car moving and they're saying this moves like that person who we've caught with other data points over time. So we're going to use that to assume it's this person. So we're seeing it's like expanding. These tools don't stop at license plates. They never do. They're always there for like permanent tracking, essentially. And they're just like building and bloating their systems with like any one of these things, millions of issues can go wrong with them. And they just keep combining them and extending them outward. I think to Nat's point too, like these issues aren't isolated. Um, Not only is this a crisis of carcerality and racism, as we've seen in policing, but like it's very directly tied to the development of an AI state, like the kind of desires for AI corporations to make sure their tools will make some kind of return on investment, even though it's hemorrhaging money. That's a threat to the ecology. That's a threat to, our economic system. It's just like every possible threat is like fusing at the level of technology. And I cannot possibly think of a single point of organizing at this point here in this part of the world that doesn't also converge to some extent to these kinds of tools. So they need to be taken down. It's just like it's just like fascism incarnate, I would say. And then one more slide, I believe. Yeah. So again, question on oversight because I think it's not too unfamiliar to us to have these conversations with people who perhaps are they're open to talking about whether or not we should have surveillance apparatuses, but maybe they're still a little skeptical, and they think, what if we can just do it in a way where we reduce the harms and we just get the benefits, of which I'll say there aren't any, right? But we can entertain that. They think there are some benefits, and perhaps we can do away with some of the harms. And often what we hear is you just need like the right oversight apparatus, whether it's some kind of like a community oversight board, or it's some kind of internal review, or it's some sort of like external system. But I won't speak for all of my friends here on this call, but I'll say personally, I think it's extremely unlikely to see that happen at all. I mean, Flock itself is actively disabling any auditing software that directly prevents any kind of oversight capability. The police themselves, on the other direction, right? Like not the supply side, but the demand side, if you will, they're being told to be as vague as possible about why they're using Flock. So things like the Trust Act don't even function because there's nothing to like, to extend influence over. And we don't even really know how this data is being used, where it's ending up, how it's being sold. Ostensibly, it's being used to develop AI products to follow people around in other weird, creepy ways. But like, there's it's hard to do oversight if you can't see it, right? And like there's this irony in a way where they try to see as much of you as possible, but also try to hide as much of themselves. And Freddie, I see you have a hand, so I'll pass it over to you. I know you've got some great thoughts on this.
I do think that one thing that is worth noting is that flock lies to because the point of the marketing strategy is to get into as many places as possible. They do lie to everyone, including elected officials and police chiefs and stuff like that.
Including their own employees at sometimes too.
Yeah, and so like there are opportunities to leverage that. Like one thing that we've seen is um police chiefs caught flat-footed because they are swearing up and down, like they will tell you that, like the explicitly, like we're depending on the vendor to tell us the truth or whatever, and then for example, and so we've seen in many places, like for example in Madison, Wisconsin, they had a contentious vote to extend the flock contract for I think 3 years, and then 2 days later they realized that they were being lied to about the capabilities of the flock contract, and then they immediately reconvened session and canceled it.
That was Oshkosh. Yes.
Oh yes, thank you. I spent so much time in Madison with my friends who are in that region that all mashes together. Anyway, but the point is that because these people are being lied to, that's like an opportunity to be like, hey, what are you doing? Like it might be hard for us to get the auditing data like through FOIA or something like that, but you can use your elected officials to be like, hey,
Yeah.
you
I
claim that,
did
like,
that. I sent
yeah.
that exact email to my whole city council. I just like sent them the ACLU article, Flock Lies, and
Yeah.
it has like the whole breakdown about that. And I think it was good because it's like, no, do not invite them to come explain what to assuage our concerns because you can't trust anything they say.
Yeah. And like, but that is an opportunity, right? Because you can, for example, there was this police chief who, or chief, mayor who was very, didn't want to get rid of the contract because he said that like it was useful for solving crimes. And then it turned out that what they were doing was basically, um, doing crime suppression for other cities, like basically solving cases for other cities. Like, and not really like doing anything that like the local city needed, right? And so it becomes like a pressure point where you can be like, look, if you want to loan your officers to solve crimes that are occur at the lulls in in a different state, that's on you. But like those are questions that like people get really pissed off about. So that's just to say that like I don't really like this idea of oversight because I think it misses the point. Because it's like it's not that how do I say this? Like oversight, like it's just a pressure point to where you can highlight the contradictions of like everyone's being lied to. And it might be enough to flip a few votes. Um, it does mean that like the company has also it's worth noting that like we do mention oversight because like the company has basically this business strategy of they're shifting tactics. They'll say things like we believe in transparency, we'll set up a transparency portal for you. um but that's all like stuff that they teach you in business school about like PR management and crisis intervention. So you kind of have to be careful here about the oversight. Yeah, thank you. Oversight question mark. Because it is not like it's not like a thing that like we should just ask for. It's like a pressure point that we have seen work really well in other places. Okay, I'll leave it there.
Sick. Thanks, Ray. That was really great. I don't really have any more to add on this slide, so I think I'll turn it over to Matt. How about it, Matt?
Wait, can we let Arletty speak real quick and then Matt?
Yeah, totally.
I had one little thing that I talked about during the run through of this, but I forgot to add. Okay, so we were talking about how DHS and other agencies are tracking who's doing FOIA, and I wanted to just talk about because the goal with this call is to get y'all excited about volunteering with in the service of this cause. And I wanted to just say that um I understand that it can be a little bit intimidating for the first time, especially if you're taking out a FOIA or you're going to talk to your police chief or the sheriff or something like that. It can feel like you might be making yourself a target. You might feel like you're sticking out like a sore thumb. But I wanted to just say that like that little hump gets easier over time, and that is kind of the point of our whole group. We are all here to support each other in this. I even have a friend who is a lawyer that I talked to about this, and he was just like, "You've got to treat our system like it works. Treating it like it works is what allows us to hold it accountable to work." We live in Illinois, and so if something were to happen at the local level where problems arise because of your activism, there are higher authorities to appeal to that we can ask to help us with this and just, trust the system, even though understanding that it doesn't always work perfectly. This is the way that we can ask it to work. So anyway, that was the little thing I wanted to say.
Thank you. That was an excellent point. Thank you so much. Yeah, so let's talk about what else is in Chicago. So ALPR has been around for a long time. We have them as red light cameras. We have them as speeding cameras. We have quite a lot of things, but it's definitely not the first thing that has been built, and it definitely will not be the last. A lot of this stuff comes from like post 9/11 interest in DHS building our surveillance infrastructure. In the city of Chicago, we have a thing called Operation Virtual Shield, which was a thing that came out of, I think, the last Daily, basically to get businesses to agree to give their cameras to police and the DHS so that they could basically, slurp up all that video at their will. That program stopped. But Lightfoot had an interest in giving people vouchers to add new cameras to, and then supply the camera feeds to other people. There's also ShotSpotter. We've talked about ShotSpotter quite a lot in the past, so I don't think I'll dwell on them too much. One thing I'll say though is that we recently did find we received a bunch of FOIA data that showed that include like a URL for audio clips of ShotSpotter, and in those clips we found people laughing. There's a recording of a kid asking one of his parents if they need to put on a jacket. ShotSpotter has been used in prosecution. Specifically, people's voices have been used in prosecution against people. So it's a deeply troubling situation. There's also And I'm just basically going to be going down the list, but there's a lot. And a lot of these things creep up. A lot of these things have been built up with the interest of monitoring traffic, for example. And it's a lot of it is done with good intention of like, we just want to know how to control traffic flow so that people can get to work on time, things like that. But the way that they do that, for example, is City of Chicago has access to a data set from, or at least they had, I think it's a little bit different now because this company went bankrupt. The City of Chicago has a data feed from this company by the name of Parsons, not Lucy Parsons Labs, by the company named Parsons, who received telematics data from vehicles. And when I tried to FOIA the literal data of that City of Chicago was receiving, they denied it, saying that they would have to go through 100 million data points per day over, I requested just a week. And the fact that City of Chicago has a data feed of vehicles going into the City of Chicago by their vehicles snitching on them going into the city, where they're going, when they move their wheel to the left or to the right, and when they brake, it's messed up. There's also ad companies. Ad companies, they have Bluetooth sensors all over the place. So a lot of the like billboards, a lot of like bus stops, things like that. A lot of those have Bluetooth sensors for the purpose of selling that data so that they can give you ads. And yeah, that data is absolutely accessible to police through subpoenas, through other things. I'll also talk about iPaths in Illinois. You go along the highway, you have to go through the tollway. That's ALPR as well. And when when police are interested in that data, they don't need a search warrant to get access to that data. In fact, there was a law that was tried to pass, that some legislators tried to pass to make iPass data only accessible through search warrants. The police unions basically had a fit over it, and they said, no, we need to have access to this data, full stop. So there's a lot of that stuff. There's also Wi-Fi tracking. There is tire pressure monitoring system tracking. This is one of the oldest ones that I know of. Basically, every single tire is legally required to have a tire pressure sensor that says how much air is left in it. And each one of those has a unique identifier in them. So you can effectively track people based on their tire pressure. And the reason that's possible is just because they are wireless and they're required to be wireless. And a lot of the stuff, like Illinois State Police is one of the bigger ones involved in a lot of this. Cook County Sheriff's Office is involved in a lot of this. And they seem to be more and more pernicious with this stuff. They seem to be reaching further and further. Cook County Sheriff's Office, for example, they're the ones that are installing flock cameras within City of Chicago. The way that we were able to identify those was by looking at dig permits. So like literally going through like, where did they dig a hole into the ground, and looking at like what the permit was for that. So like just the means that we have to access, like even figuring out where these devices are, like we have to go through permit records. It's absolutely ridiculous. There's also Axon. Axon is all over the place in the city of Chicago. There's a lot of traffic monitors. If you've ever seen those, like they're candy cane looking ones, those are 360 cameras that are used to, Axon is in CPS. Those candy cane looking ones are just 360 cameras. Say on this list is, actually I'll say two more things. Motorola. So my personal theory is that Motorola is one of the companies driving a lot of this stuff. They are not necessarily the ones that install the devices, but they're the ones that install the communication networks. They're the ones that help install the fiber optics are the ones that help install the antennas. If you look at like a lot of the police conferences that happen at hotels, Motorola is consistently one of the top funders for these conferences, and there's a reason for that. They make a lot of money for helping police track people far and wide. And then last thing I'll say is like the Department of Transportation, there's this national level project to basically make connected cars a thing. So like cars communicating with each other. And like there's no way to do that in a way without communicating between cars in a way that like the government can literally listen in on that and then figure out like where you are, where you've been, and all that. And like it's done under the guise of traffic management, but like police use it. Police will always use that. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. So I think that's all I'll say on this slide. Yeah, there's a lot. And this is definitely not an exhaustive list. I think the big thing about a lot of this stuff is that the name of the game is ultimately integration. All of these companies are separate, but like if you go to Flock's website, they have I think a list of 39 companies that they have partnerships with, and that means like technological partnerships. That means that they are sharing information in a way that makes things linkable. So like there are companies that do cell phone tracking, and then they pair that with Flock data, or they pair that with Bluetooth data or advertisement data. It's all over the place, and like the more and more these integrations continue to exist, the more these network effects start to pile on. The more capable they are, and the more fucking creepy they are. Pardon the language. Can you go to the next slide? Cool. Okay. So how do we build power? This is I think one of the hardest questions, but I think in a sort of meta way, I think we kind of figure out how to do this together. There are a lot of forces that don't want us to be doing this research, that don't want us to be doing this advocacy, that don't want us to be talking to government officials. So a lot of what this is, a lot of the work that we do together is together so that we can build power together and face these forces in a way that makes us feel secure. It's very easy to feel terrified from personal experience. It's very easy to feel terrified in like submitting a FOIA request. It's very easy to feel terrified having a conversation. This is terrifying. And it's one of those things that like we support each other, we build each other, we build each other's skills. I think one of the things that tends to happen in this line of work, this sort of research and such, it's very easy to get kind of stuck in Chicago, for example, or get stuck in New York, or get stuck in LA. But in many ways, a lot of what's important is also building these same relationships, these same research partnerships, and things like that in smaller cities, in smaller counties, in counties where there's only one person doing the research. And if I can help that one person submit some FOIA requests or figure out how to do a little bit of extra research, that goes a very long way. Because like now we have an example of this city that they rallied for Flock. And one person, because they submitted a FOIA request, or because they talked to City Hall, they were able to get the contract canceled. And that's very powerful. I think a lot of what we do, like on the FOIA side, for example, is learning how to do things. I think that's one of the things I like to contribute a lot with, is like you want to know who's emailing who, you want to know who Flock is emailing, you want to know who's being convinced by Flock. Email requests for email is a really good way to do that. But also like email metadata requests. So like oftentimes, because if you do a request for like 10,000 emails, they will deny it for being unduly burdensome. A very easy, maybe not easy, but like a path forward through that is to request the email metadata of like when it was sent, who sent it, the subject line, and then working from there. So like there's a lot of these like tools to expand what we know and what we can know. Another thing I'll say is like a lot of these FOIA the FOIA stuff that we do is Flock is a great example of this. Like because Flock is being searched across the country, across the cities and all that. If you submit a FOIA request to one place, it'll include searches that were done in other places. So like if you get a FOIA denial in Waukegan, Waukegan did probably the biggest FOIA denial I've ever seen in my life. I've submitted many FOIA requests. I've never seen one that big and that dense. But like we are able to figure a lot of that stuff out because of other cities that have been able to get us access to those FOIA records. For example, City of Chicago does. We don't have a Flock contract, but Flock is absolutely used to prosecute people in Chicago. And one example I want to say is like Marimar Martinez, after she was just shot, shot by ICE, they put domestic terrorist charges on her, and they basically used Flock by using Flock on like I think it was like 13 different cities in the area. That's not the example I wanted to give. What was the example? Like on the example I wanted to give. But a lot of like if you're not able to figure out, I remember now. So like City of Chicago doesn't have Flock, but like we do use it, and the way that we're able to figure out how it's being used in Chicago for prosecution is by FOIAing other places. So Bloomingdale, City of Bloomingdale is one of the places that whose data I've been looking at pretty thoroughly. I've been able to find 120 arrests done by Chicago Police Department where Flock was used at any point in the investigation of that led to that arrest. And only one of those arrest reports included the word Flock out of 120. So like this idea that like we're not able to figure it out in Chicago, but we can spread out our work. We can go to other places. Kind of the term I like to use on it is stochastic FOIA, which is not an homage to stochastic terrorism. I promise. I came up with it before that. I promise. But a lot of these like you submit 100 requests to 100 different cities, like if you get like one to give you data, you can share that with those other 99 cities. And that capacity, that capability that we have, it can really only be done as a community. It can really only be done if we do this together. And then also like another thing that we need is if anybody knows any attorneys, a big thing that that's needed as we build this power is like we need to sue the government often and often. But unfortunately, like one of the problems that we have as a community right now is it's very difficult to find attorneys who will do FOIA lawsuits. So a lot of what is needed from a community in building power is building up these attorneys who are like, a little bit new, people or attorneys who wouldn't normally do FOIA. Like FOIA, if you win a FOIA case, that lawyer recoups all of the legal fees. So like it is very easy for them to justify doing a pro bono case for you. So like, but unfortunately, like we need to find those lawyers. We need to build those lawyers up. We need to kind of bring on this kind of like this new push. Yeah, I think I think that's all I got. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? Happy to answer anything.
Before we do questions, if there's any loose ends any of our facilitators want to tie up real quick. And then, yeah, the rest of the time, would love to answer some questions. Hearing no loose ends. Yeah, we got a question in the chat. We've had a few questions throughout the night that I think have been answered. But if you feel like you want a deeper answer, please uplift your question again. But yeah, does anyone want to tackle Isla's I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Sorry if I messed that up. You could call me out, please do. When you have all that data, how do you go through all of it to find the relevant stuff? Do you have any particular techniques? Or do you have to just ship manually, which kind of feels like we should revive our FOIA training.
Yeah, I love this question. Like, you're not going to get an answer that is great, unfortunately. A lot of it is sifting through the data by hand. I blessing and a curse sort of thing. I have a lot of technical skills. I know databases really well, but I don't expect anybody else. I don't expect others to necessarily have the same skills. And one of the problems that we have with is that, like, you can't open a lot of these data sets in Excel because they're just too freaking big. But if folks are interested in, like, looking at this data and going through it and figuring stuff out, we can. I'm happy to help out as much as I can. I have some tooling to turn, like, Excel files into CSV files, and things like that. But a lot of it is, like, just like when I do research for City of Chicago, what I'm looking for are the police report numbers. And those police report numbers have, like, a very specific format. It's like JJ123456 or JH123456. A lot of the sheriff's office ones are like I think it's like SO or S, I forget what it is, but there's a very specific format that these exist in. And there are ways to search through that in ways that you can find them pretty easily. Happy to help with that. This is a topic that I is very dear to my heart. So if you want to work on this and, like, brainstorm ideas for how to work through the data, I'm happy to chat.
Thank you. And then I also want to open up, just in case, like, folks in the audience or who aren't necessarily facilitating have any other insights that they feel should be addressed in this space. But then we have another question from Touchdown. We have a small local group that is interested in fighting ALPRs and POD cameras. Surveillance, oh my gosh, it just scrolled up. And surveillance in our Albany Park neighborhood. Hey, Matt. Any suggestions for working on the hyper local level? First, right out the bat, ideally, that's what we can also begin doing a little here, is working on some anti-ALPR work, as well as expanding the anti-surveillance organizing and consciousness in Chicago, so among all the regions. Other than that, from my experience, it's just like any other organizing, door-to-door stuff, canvassing, doing things like this, just linking up with, like, 1 to 2 people and building something out. Yeah, anyone else want to add, or should we move to potentially another question?
I've seen signage used to great effect. If you know where the cameras are and you make a sign that says you're being tracked, did you know? Here's, like, a little short link to follow to connect with us. That's a really great way to find people that are already concerned about it. And those are the people. It's a lot easier to find people that already have a little bit of knowledge than to bring people from zero. So that is just, like, one idea.
Yeah, I'll just really quickly add. I live in Albany Park. This is a question that I have pretty regularly. Someone recently asked me for help to figure out why a pod camera was installed. I'm pretty sure they're suing OEMC right now to get access to that. So happy to help with that. Happy to submit some FOIAs and happy to just kind of brainstorm about what that means.
Any other questions or comments?
Could I ask a question about like trade-offs?
Please do.
I am curious about I think a lot of times the framing is presented as, hey, we want to have surveillance on the street to, and like we want to use all this technology essentially to prevent the worst interactions between cops and people. So I'm just like, I'm wondering what y'all think about what repeal of technologies or elimination of technologies could do to increase actual like cop personnel and beat patrollers, because that's typically like the dichotomy that people present.
Could you rephrase your question? I'm sorry to ask.
Well, I think that if I understand correctly, you were asking, and let me know if I'm wrong, but it sounded to me like you were saying, if we get rid of the cameras, are we going to have more cops? Is that right?
That's what the cops say.
Okay. Um,
So,
I I just want to say like, and I'm not in Chicago, by the way, so but same thing. I don't think that the cameras were never necessary in the first place. So taking them down shouldn't mean that we need more of anything else. That's just like what I would say. But anyway, what?
yeah, I think one, cops are always going to advocate for more cops. Doesn't matter what you bring to them, their solution is like always more cops. Yeah, like individually, there's 100% a few cops who are like, ah, no, you alternate, like 100%. I don't want to act like that doesn't exist. And also, when you're at these city council meetings, when you're at stuff like that, generally the cop that is there is like pro cop to the max. Um, some framing, and I think this also goes back to the conversation that was had in the comments around like who's seen as legitimate or not. Um, some framing that I usually use, and it is not geared towards the cops, even though, like, even in Chicago or in other like small areas, often you the cops are a obstacle that you need to go through because they have a lot of sway, but gearing your framing and answers to to your neighbors and to elected officials is one, probably where you want to start. And then two, the framing that I would use is similar to what Arletty named. Like, okay, well, we know that this hasn't worked anyways, so why would we need to add to it? And then I think it also goes back to the point that we were making earlier of like, when we are talking about ending surveillance, we are not just talking about taking away things. We are talking, we need to be pairing it with, instead of surveillance, invest in mental health resources, invest in housing, invest in this, right? Things that we know and have a long track record of actually creating safety and actually lowering instances of violence that people feel need police. And then I see Emily's hand up as well.
Oh, sorry, before Emily jumps in, I think if I could approach the question slightly differently too, I do think that there is something about the nature of these technologies that isn't reducing those interactions, those violent interactions with police themselves, but may instead just be accelerating them. So I think it's worthwhile to look deeper into how the rhetorical strategy that's being taken up by, I'll assume, pro-police individuals, maybe even just the police themselves, isn't really rooted in anything realistic. I mean, we've had all of these auditory tools that have seemingly just created more and more situations where violent interactions, behaviors like stop and frisk and so forth have just been justified through technical tooling. And I think I think if you ask me, to Arletty's point, I think I find it quite unlikely that the removal of these tools would actually increase those interactions. I find it somewhat unlikely as well that it would increase the number of beat cops uh, organically. I feel like that's a political question that the cops will just try to make happen. Um, but I do think that what we'd see with these kinds of tools are more and more machine-driven deployments that result in very excessive behaviors, things like use of force, violence, profiling, and so forth. I'd actually argue by keeping the cameras, you are making it worse. Like you're actually setting up a situation that's like far more dangerous. But yeah, that's my perspective. Sorry, Emily, to cut in.
Thanks. And hi, Pooja. I was going to say, I think what I was hearing from your question was also cops saying, or just people using the argument that, well, we're also watching the cops, so don't we want to keep the cameras? And when I talk to people about surveillance and in general, I feel like using Chicago as an example, um, I think that the average person that I talk to, even if they have never done organizing in their lives, whether they have been pro cop their whole lives until recently or still are, I tend to use like real life examples. So using examples of when violence has been committed by cops or by people and it has been caught on camera. We have more cameras than we've ever had before in our hands, and most people have cameras easily accessible very quickly, and we're seeing more horrors than we've ever seen every day. And I think picking out a few examples of that and saying, well, that all of the cameras that caught this did not stop this from happening. And I think one of the things I was going to say is I think a very useful rhetorical tool, especially in the city of Chicago and surrounding areas, is linking this to the larger topic of violence against immigrants. And I think, especially right now, as we're seeing so much violence be done, all we're seeing is more things in direct opposition of the Trust Act and things like that are we're not able to enforce. And I would say, you know, there's it's more nuanced in terms of the shot spotter versus the flock camera question. But I think what people do understand, where they might not want to get into a whole discussion about, well, it's about public safety and what creates public safety. Well, better school programs, better mental health care, all of these things people are going to zone out. But if you use specific examples from your community, if you're doing the hyperlocal approach, or if you're doing the citywide approach, using examples of how people have been directly victimized, like Marimar, or like other people who have been directly targeted by ICE, I think that utilizing ICE as a scapegoat here is a useful tactic because they are a federal force. And when people have that as, the villain, or however you want to put it, it lessens the level of conflict that people are coming into the discussion with. So if you
Absolutely. I want to say also ICE and AI too. AI is a good scapegoat for that.
Yeah, and I think a local cop, people are much more sympathetic to than ICE as a larger function. And I think if you focus on how these systems can be taken over by, bad actors and utilized for their purposes, and then bring in all of the cops using this to perpetuate more intimate partner violence and all of these things, I think, that's just my approach as how I've done things.
Very good point. Thank you.
If I may make one other point really quick, there was an article that came out in the Atlanta Press Collective. They in Atlanta, where Flock is from, their clearance rates have not gone up since the Flock cameras were have been out. Like just the simple fact that they're not increasing their clearance rates is just absolutely absurd. Like the fact that they are in, they're bringing this system to everybody when it doesn't even work where it was built. It's messed up.
Thank you all. We're at 7:30. Please feel free to email us with any questions. Can connect anyone to anyone. Yeah, next thing is like we'll be sending a follow-up email with feedback form. We'd love to like talk to folks and get y'all involved more and like really build out this space. So thank you everyone for hopping on. Yeah, look out for that follow-up email and yeah, enjoy your day.
Thanks, everyone.